Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 317, Packers-Eagles. We'll do a mini recap. We did the blog recap. I know we had the Monday podcast. We didn't do a podcast Tuesday. We did a good old-fashioned written word blog recap, and I actually had a great time doing it. It had been a long time since I'd done that, like I said on the Monday podcast, and I said in the blog. That used to be a foundational part of Strange Brew pre-podcast era, Strange Brew 1.0. Same terrible takes, same terrible gambling advice just written on a page on the internet instead of spoken into a microphone. But I had a good time doing that. That used to be a thing we did all the time. So we'll go over that a little bit. I know we're 4 days removed now from the Packer-Eagle Monday night game, but a few things I want to hit on there. I have what I believe to be, in our short history of doing emails on this podcast, strangebrewpod@aol.com. I think we've got one of the best emails that we've gotten. And we've gotten some good ones. And we've gotten some emails that made me put a bet on Baker Mayfield to win the MVP that's not going to win. I should invoice that guy for that bet that we put down that's probably not going to win. He talked me into Baker Mayfield. But this email, which involves a take revolving around Matt LaFleur, Craig Counsell, and Pat Murphy, I think is pretty spot on. We're going to read that coming up after we do the little Packer-Eagle recap. Then we'll get set for Packers-Giants. I don't love the vibes of this game. I wish I did. You've got an interim coach. You've got a wild card quarterback that sounds like he's going to be starting on Sunday in Jameis Winston. But this is one you absolutely have to get. If the Packers don't get this game, you're really going to hear a conversation about Matt LaFleur and his coaching status crank up. And the Packers are going to put themselves in a difficult playoff position if they come out of Sunday at 5-4-1 with a loss to a 2-8 team, because the schedule after that is really tough the rest of the way. You've got to find a way to get the offense going and to get a win on Sunday. We'll talk a little Badgers, Indiana. I don't have a whole lot of hope for back-to-back wins over top 25 teams for the Badgers, but maybe. Can we see more progressive steps? Can you keep this a game for a little bit? Can your defense keep you in this game? You're taking on a national title contender on the road. We'll talk about that. We'll hit a little bit on the Bucs, and then I'm going to make some absolutely disgusting gambling picks. I was going over the full slate of college football and NFL football. I've got 4 picks, but they are not in what I would call desirable games that you would want to watch. But I feel actually pretty good about the picks. We'll go over that too. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. Hit time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, face into center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win!
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's intercepted. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul. A pinnacle ball throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there. And they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in Friday morning. Before we do any of what we teased, I do want to play this. This was going viral. I think it was yesterday we blogged about it too. And it's a little piece of audio from the Kelsey Brothers podcast, New Heights. Gets slightly more downloads than Strange Brew does on a regular basis, which it already was anyway. Then you add the Taylor Swift. Who cares? The Taylor Swift component to it. Jason Kelsey's about to be the most famous brother-in-law in America. But Jason Kelsey, who was a center for the Eagles, won a title or 2 titles. Does he have 2 rings? He has at least 1 ring. He might have 2 rings. And in his post-playing career, he has become kind of a media darling. He pops up on ESPN. He's a part of the Monday Night Football coverage. And what he does now, it looks like, when they do Monday Night Football coverage, is he goes to the area, whoever's hosting the game, and it seems like he just makes the rounds. He meets the people, he shakes the hands, he kisses the babies, he stops at all the great local food spots, eats all the foods, and drinks all the drinks. It seems like a pretty good gig, and he seems to really enjoy it. So he was in town, or in Green Bay, and I guess southeastern Wisconsin, you could say, for the Monday Night Football game, Packers and Eagles. And him recapping 24 hours of living a football weekend in Wisconsin is one of the funniest minute and 40-second pieces of audio that I think I've ever listened to, and it's so accurate. And I'm going to play you it. We're playing this thing unfiltered. Now, as you know, we try to keep this thing clean for the most part on this podcast. And 317 episodes in, I think we've had to drop money in the swear jar like 4 or 5 times, probably after the Pete Alonso 3-run home run, if I had to guess. There are certain moments where I think we've had to drop some change in the swear jar. There is going to be 4 or 5 instances in this little clip I'm going to play where we're dropping some F-bombs and whatever else, but I think you almost need it to get the full context because it only adds more color to what a football weekend in Green Bay looks like in terms of eating and drinking and supper clubs and all that stuff. I love this breakdown so much. So without further ado, we're just going to play you this unfiltered raw, and then we'll have a few takes on that. But I have to start the podcast with this today.
Jerry and alcohol, for me, doesn't sit well.
Over the course of the day, this is my day. I go to Lambeau, get a tour. We go to Legend Larry's, which apparently is a wing spot in the Wisconsin area.
Sheboygan.
I eat chicken wings and fried food there. I have about 7 spotted cows because when you're in Wisconsin, you're going to drink a spotted cow or 2. I go straight from there, an hour drive to this freaking supper club after the 4 o'clock games end. And at the supper club, the first thing you do is the whole thing is you sit at one table by the bar and you order your food there. And while you're ordering your food, you're drinking alcohol, mainly old fashions. So I have an old fashioned there. Then we go to the table. I eat a prime rib the size of the entire fucking plate, all right?
Yeah.
And then I top it off with an ice cream drink. When I tell you my stomach had no fucking idea what I was doing, like there's just fried chicken, prime rib, ice cream drinks, beer, old fashioned. I probably took about 4 years off of my life in one day going to freaking Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That is one of the most accurate phrases I've ever heard in my life. 4 years off my life in one day.
And chopping it up with these. I had Jägermeister. A guy said, hey, you want to play beer die? We're playing beer die. And he's like, and loser buys. I lost. I was like, all right, what do you guys want to do? What's a Wisconsin drink? And they said Jaeger. I said, I haven't had Jaeger in probably 15 years. Let's do it. My stuff, it was churning all sorts of different ways, but I'm not a bitch, so I handled it fine. But I was like, I don't know what the hell I just did to myself today. And I loved every second of it.
It sounds like heaven on earth. When you verbalize, and I put this in the blog, because I think if you're a Wisconsinite or you're a Packer fan or whatever and you grew up in the area, you can identify with everything he's saying. That is some of the most relatable Midwest content I've ever heard. But it is interesting, as relatable as it is, when he says out loud in a minute and 40 seconds, that amount of food and that amount of drink, you do have to take a step back and say, my God, that does seem a little heavy. Now, the supper club that he went to, this is why this was such a popular topic on B93 this week, is Schwartz's Supper Club.
Never underestimate the power of the Schwartz.
Schwartz's Supper Club in St. Anne, which I think technically is kind of in the New Holstein area. So it's about 30-ish minutes away from Sheboygan, a place a lot of people go. It is an iconic supper club in this part of the state. I have not been there in a long time. In fact, the last time that I think I went to Schwartz's Supper Club was probably on my 23rd or 24th birthday. I think my folks took me out there and we got steak and lobster. It is classic Wisconsin supper club. There's a salad bar. Like Kelsey said, you sit down at a pre-table. That's the best thing about supper clubs is you've got the either sit around the bar or you sit at the pre-table. Then you get to the table. But yeah, you're noshing and on breadsticks and cheese and old fashions before you even get there. But I have never had the prime rib. Now, I am not a huge prime rib guy. I don't know if that's a man card situation. If you want it, you can take it. I don't care. I don't mind a prime rib, but it's not something that I absolutely have to have. If I go to a supper club, more often than not, I am getting a steak. And any kind of steak. I mean, it doesn't matter if we're going T-bone, we're going filet, I'll do a steak. And I know prime rib kind of fits in that realm, but it's not something, I know some people in my life I know go to specific places on a Saturday night because they've got to get the Saturday night prime rib special. I enjoy it from time to time, but it's not something I get often, and it's probably been a couple of years since I've had it. So I had to go look at the prime ribs at Schwartz's that he's talking about because he says it is preposterously big, the dinosaur steak. This thing is insane. So I think he got the Schwartz's cut. I don't think he got the prime rib or the prime rib for 2 cut. There's a cut where you get a piece of prime rib and it's intended for 2 people and it's like 55 ounces. I don't think that's what he had, but I think he had the 35-ounce, the Schwartz's cut prime rib. And this is like a hunk of meat like I've never seen. The first thing that popped into my head is this scene.
I think that just about does it.
He's not done yet.
Well, he may take a little while with that last bite, but it'll go down.
That ain't the last bite.
Well, sure it is. There's nothing on that plate but gristle and fat.
What a scene.
No problem. Listen,
The way she says, "Oh God, no," is some of the best comedic timing and phrasing I think I've ever heard. It does. It kind of looks like the old 90s Sixer. So that was a huge hunk of meat. Now, as we were talking about this, I played a different clip on the B93 Morning Show where Kelsey, at the beginning of the podcast, specifically shouts out Schwartz's and said that he couldn't finish the prime rib. Of course, you had people coming from the clouds on the text, like, I couldn't finish the prime rib. So I guess he didn't get through it. And I put in the blog, in Jason Kelsey's defense. Now, he's a former NFL player. He's a big guy, offensive lineman. Not as big, like a lot of offensive linemen post-playing career. He has trimmed up quite a bit. But my defense of Kelsey in the blog is this. If you don't know that you're getting a 35-ounce piece of meat, if you don't know that until it's sitting at your table, you need some mental preparation time. Like, if you wake up, if that's what you want to get at Schwartz's, if you're going to a supper club and you're getting a 30-ounce prime rib, a king prime rib, or whatever it is, whatever you call it, if you know that from the beginning of the day to the point where you're sitting there and it's in front of you, you are in such a better spot because you have mentally prepared. You just can't dive into the arena and expect to take down a 35-ounce prime rib. You have got to give yourself a little lead time there before you sit down and tackle that bad boy. So that was my defense of Kelsey. If you know the day before or the morning of, that's what you're eating later in the day, and you can kind of plan out your entire day. And like he said, you got to think about all the other stuff he's been eating during the course of the day. It's not like he was fasting leading up to the 35-ounce prime rib. He was packing down spotted cows and Legend Larry's wings and all that stuff. So he was already probably on a pretty big binge before he went in there. So I don't think there's any shame in not being able to finish a 35-ounce prime rib given where he was at in the day. I did like the ice cream drink. He had to explain that in another part of the podcast. He had to explain what the ice cream drink was to Travis. And it is a staple to get either the grasshopper would be the go-to for me or my dad back in the day. But there's the Brandy Alexander, there's the pink squirrel, there's 3 or 4 of those different kind of ice cream drinks. But I said in the blog, you need that because after a day of beers and wings and a 35-ounce prime rib and whatever else you're eating there, that is a cool down. It's like cooling a nuclear reactor. You've got to have that ice cream drink at the end of a meal like that just to cool your jets a little bit and get yourself reined back in. I also put in the blog, and Jason Kelsey wouldn't know this maybe going into it, but pre-tums. Because he talks about his stomach churning, and it's probably going to churn either way. You're going to be on spin cycle either way there. But if you, again, know what you're getting into in the course of that day, you put about 3 or 4 Tums down right in the morning. Like, that's your breakfast, is a bunch of Tums. And then you've got to make sure you have a little package in your car or a little thing of Rolaids with you that you can kind of spike in throughout the day just to kind of settle things in a little bit. But that description of 24 hours in the state of Wisconsin, I thought was absolutely perfect on the New Heights podcast from Jason and Travis Kelsey. Sounded like a hell of a weekend in Wisconsin. All right, let's get into it. Now, I don't know how much time you want to spend on a game that happened 4 days ago. We did the blog recap, the written blog recap. Make sure you get your damn it doll. This is how I let off the
She got me this Packers damn it
Love
doll.
Farley.
There you go.
A damn it doll? I don't understand.
I guess the idea is if the Packers are in trouble or something like that, you bang it on the table and go, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it.
Gonna use that on Monday. Well, like we talked about on the Monday podcast, this was a chance coming off of a disappointing game where you lost as 2 touchdown favorites to the Panthers at Lambeau Field the week prior. This was your chance to spin it back in the right direction, to get a big win against the reigning Super Bowl champs, a contender again in the NFC. And if you do that, if you go out there and you get a win on Monday, nobody remembers the Carolina game. Well, with the way things play out on Monday, now you've stacked together 2 bad offensive performances back-to-back, and you have back-to-back home losses. And losing to the Eagles, I guess, isn't the end of the world, but that makes losses like the Browns game and the Panther game that much more upsetting because you didn't get the win against the Eagles, so now you lost a game you kind of expected to lose, but now you've got 2 losses against teams you didn't expect to lose to, kind of stacks on top of each other. Now, like I said in the blog, Number one off the top, and I feel like you have to have a Goodwill Hunting, it's not your fault moment here. The defense was incredible on Monday. They gave up one drive. That was it. They gave up one drive. They did force a fumble. That fumble in the first quarter, offense couldn't do anything with it. So they do force a turnover. Didn't get any sacks, but they did get pressure on Hurts. I think Micah Parsons had 3 or 4 quarterback pressures on the night. He was sort of in the backfield on and off throughout the night, even though he didn't get a sack. But to hold that team to 10 points, if you tell me going into Monday night the defense is going to hold an offense with Hurts and Saquon Barkley and Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, who I don't even know if he had a catch. I know A.J. Brown sort of had a weird career in Philly where they won the Super Bowl last year, but his numbers, was he in Tennessee before that? His numbers haven't quite been where they were before they traded for him. He's had some big games here and there, but not the big seasons where he's piling up 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns or something like that. That just hasn't happened for him there. I don't even know if he had a catch on Monday. Did he even play on Monday? I don't know. But that's how good the defense was. It was one drive. What was it, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, where they had the big pitch and catch to Saquon where he got loose in the flat and no one was there. I think Carrington Valentine missed an open field tackle where you could just tell as Valentine was coming up to him and it was one-on-one, you could kind of see in Carrington Valentine's body demeanor that this was going to be a difficult one. He got juked out of his jock just about, and Saquon went, 30 yards after that. No shame in that. I mean, that's not the first person in a one-on-one open field tackling situation that has been unable to bring down Saquon Barkley. And then a play later, they had the bomb from Hurts to Devontae Smith. I think it was 40 yards. I thought the coverage from Evan Williams wasn't even that bad. It was just a really good ball and a nice catch by a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver. But that was it. That was, a 4-play, 80-yard drive. You knew at some point that Eagle offense was going to pop off and get in the end zone. But if you only give up 10 points, that has got to be a win. So this defense, again, in the 3 losses this year, they gave up 13 points in Cleveland, 7 of which I'm not even going to stick them with because that was the interception from Jordan Love that set them up inside the 5-yard line, I think. So you gave up 13, 7 not really your fault. They gave up 16 to Carolina and gave up 10 to Philadelphia in 3 losses. How can those be losses with an offensive head coach and the offense that you've created? You finally have a defense. I remember we had a texter on the morning show on Tuesday that said, we finally have a defense, John, and now the offense can't score points. Why can't we have everything going at the same time? That's a fair question. I'll take my answer off the air. But this defense, with the exception of the Dallas game, and that seems to be the outlier, and, they weren't great maybe in the first half against Arizona, or the second half they had an up-and-down performance against Cincinnati. But this defense, with the exception of that Dallas game where the Cowboys scored 40 points and it looked like they could score on unlimited drives, however many drives in the second half they were going to get, they were going to score a touchdown or a field goal at the minimum. But beyond that game, this appears to be a championship caliber defense that can help you make a deep run in the playoffs, help you win 10, 11, 12 games in the regular season, make a deep run in the playoffs, and maybe be a Super Bowl caliber defense. They are the 5th best defense in the NFL in terms of total yards. They are the 6th best defense in the NFL in terms of points given up per game. The turnovers aren't there, but it does seem like they're starting to get them more now with that fumble recovery on Monday. I think they have 1 in each of their past 4 games, but I think they're 30th or 31st in terms of turnovers. But every other peripheral number looks great. This looks like a title quality defense, and they were again on Monday, but just didn't get any help from their offense. Now, the offense, back-to-back weeks where they just have not been able to put points on the board. 13 points against the Panthers, 7 points against the Eagles. And the Eagles did to the Packer offense exactly what the Panther offense did to the Packer offense. And I would expect this weekend the Giants are going to have a similar approach. Now, I'm going to play some Jeff Hafley audio here coming up talking about the Packer offense, which actually got me kind of fired up. Jeff Hafley, there's going to be a lot of conversation with where the Packer defense is, where they are in the rankings, which we just talked about. It's his second year. They were a fringe top 5 defense in year 1 last year. He is a New Jersey native, okay? And the Giants have a head coaching vacancy now. Their interim is taking over this week, but they are going to be looking for the next good young head coach. And we already talked about last year with how good Hafley is in the media, how fun he is to listen to, and to listen to him articulate football ideas to a common Joe like you or me. We've talked about he seems like a leader of men. So there's going to be a lot of conversation this weekend about could Hafley be the next head coach in New York with what he's done to that Packer defense. But when you look at the offensive side of things, 2 weeks ago, the Panthers made a decision. And this is coming off of the Packers scoring 35 in Pittsburgh. I think the Packers had the 6th best offense in the NFL coming out of that game where they scored 35 in Pittsburgh on Sunday night. And even going into Monday, With the bad game against Carolina, they had the 8th best offense in the NFL. Now they have the 13th, I think, or 14th best offense after 2 really bad weeks back to back. But the Panther defense made a decision going into that game 2 weeks ago at Lambeau Field. And they said, we are going to sit in a soft cover 2, basically, shell zone defense. We're going to keep everything in front of us. We are not going to allow you, or at least make it very difficult for you, to get the ball downfield with a long pass, to get big chunk plays in the aerial attack where you're picking up 15, 20 yards or whatever, 10-plus yards at a pop. We're going to keep everything in front of us. You know what it is? It's the Joe Barry defense. Except the problem with the Joe Barry version of this defense is it's a bend but don't break defense, but the problem with the Joe Barry defense was it was a bend and break defense. That was the number one issue there. But it's a very similar idea. You know, Joe Barry and even Mike Pettin to some extent implemented these strategies of keep everything in front of us, make them be patient, make them earn it. And that's what the Panthers did 2 weeks ago. It's what the Eagles did on Monday. And they're betting that if they make you go on a 9, 10, 11, 12 play drive, they are betting that the Packer offense will not be disciplined enough to not make a mistake over a 10, 11, 12 play drive. And so far, both of those defenses have been right. So instead of playing the way Pittsburgh played them 3 weeks ago or Arizona played them, they play everything soft shell. They play everything back. Now, I think Matt LaFleur has to do a better job of scheming up the short passing game and the middle passing game. But I know for Packer fans out there just perusing Twitter, and it's a frustration for me too, when you watch the games that we've watched in the last 2 weeks, what do you start screaming at the TV? You say, stop handing the ball off, stop running on 2nd and long, push the ball down the field. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I thought that in each of the last 2 games against Carolina and Philadelphia. Push the ball down the field. Why can't we push the ball down the field? Well, a part of the reason is that defenses are making that very difficult. Like, remember back in that Carolina game where Love kind of got frustrated, remember? And he threw into triple coverage a la Brett Favre, and it was an easy interception. That's what happens. That's what defenses are baiting you to do. They're saying, okay, you want to try to go deep? You're throwing into double coverage. You're throwing into triple coverage, and it's going to be very tough for you to accomplish things like that, to get first downs like that. They're keeping everything in front and betting that you'll make a mistake, and the Packers do, and we saw it on Monday. It could be a sack sometimes. Jordan Love had the fumble at the end of the first half when they were in field goal range in that game. Sometimes it's an illegal formation penalty. How many times did that happen on Monday where the Packers actually got a chunk play where they got 15, 20 yards? I think both of the receptions would have been to Christian Watson, but they came back because they weren't lined up correctly. It could be a drop pass. It could be Love taking a sack, but that's what's been happening. That once they get into opponent territory, and at that point, you're probably 5 or 6 plays into a drive. Once they get into the opposing team's territory, it just feels like they can't sequence together 9, 10, 11 plays where they are not making a mistake. And it happened on Monday, and it happened the Sunday prior. You know, they've been in the opponent's territory 11 times in those 2 games, which is not a bad number. They were either in Carolina or Philadelphia territory 11 times in the last 2 games. You know how many points they have in those trips? 20. That's terrible. I mean, you figure even if you get a field goal, you got 33 on every one of those possessions. So you better believe that this is a copycat league, and the Giants are going to do this, and if the Packers can't do anything on Sunday, whoever they play next, the Vikings, they're going to do the exact same thing until the Packers prove that they can either scheme something up and get plays downfield, or until they prove that they can put together a 10 or 11 play drive and not make a mistake over that 10 or 11 play drive and score a touchdown. Until they do that consistently, defenses are going to be sitting in these soft zones and forcing you to be patient and take 3-4 yards at a time. Now, outside of LaFleur scheming up a better short passing game or a better middle passing game, which was what I would prefer to work their way around this, Matt LaFleur pretty clearly in the last 2 games, and he said it again this week, is of the idea that if we're going to get teams out of this soft shell, out of this cover 2, we have to be able to run the ball. And I don't disagree with that. I don't think it's been effective, and I think at this point, after 2 games where it has not been effective, you've got to find a better way to do it. But in theory, that's how you get teams out of this. The idea is You hammer the ball on the ground, you pick up 4 or 5 yards a carry, maybe you break off a 15 or 20-yarder, and if you do that for a couple of possessions, then all of those defenders that are sitting back are going to have to come up because you're going to need more men in the box to defend the run. Then you can get more one-on-one matchups and get the ball down the field. So that has been, in the last 2 weeks, that has been the preference for Matt LaFleur to try to get these teams out of that soft cover 2 zone. Well, I guess we'll see if he does it again that way on Sunday. I would imagine he's going to because he talked about that specifically several times in press conferences this week, or if he will be able to scheme something up to get better one-on-one matchups in the short passing game or in the middle passing game so you're not staring at 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8, which it feels like they always are, because right now Josh Jacobs is running into a wall for a yard, then he's running into a wall on 2nd and 9 for 2 yards, and then you're sitting in 3rd down and 7, and those are not advantageous down and distances. So far, that has been the idea. We have to get the running game going, and if we don't do that, we're not going to get these defenders to come back up in the box. Now, that leads me to my final point, I guess, about this past game and the game prior to that. I think the real issue here is, and look, Matt LaFleur is going to take criticism. We can talk about that a little bit too. Jordan Love is obviously going to take criticism. Those two guys, the head coach, when the offense is struggling, the offensive play caller / head coach, and the quarterback making $55 million this year, they are going to take the brunt of the arrows from Twitter and Facebook or sports radio call-in shows or emails, which we're going to get to in a little bit here, or whatever, because those are the two big spots, right? Head coach and quarterback. But I've covered a lot of football in my 20 years in radio, 20 plus years in radio. And even at a high school level or a college level or an NFL level, most coaches will tell you if you are having a problem on offense or you are having a problem on defense, what is the number one root cause of that? The line. The defensive line or the offensive line. And that's where everything starts. And the Packer offensive line has not been good. At times, it's been middle of the road this year, but overall, it has not been good. And specifically in the last 2 weeks, it has been very not good, very poor. They paid Aaron Banks a ton of money in the offseason, $77 million. Now, not all that's guaranteed, but a 4-year, $77 million contract. They paid him to be the left guard for the next couple of years and to play at a Pro Bowl level. And when they made that move, they thought they could move their Pro Bowl left guard, Elton Jenkins, to center. And the feeling was that he was so versatile that he could be an all-pro caliber center. And they talked about that in the preseason and in training camp. And he talked about it too, saying, I think I can be at that level. He had played center in college. He had played a little center in the NFL. But in the ramp up to the year, that was the conversation of, all right, we spent a bunch of money on Aaron Banks. Then we can move Elton Jenkins to center. He can do that. No problem. We've got the Walker-Morgan battle at left tackle that Walker won for a second straight camp. And we've got Zach Tom that we love at right tackle. And we're going to give him $100 million or whatever it was on the contract extension. And you're feeling kind of good about where you're at then. Then maybe Morgan is the other guard if he doesn't win the tackle battle, or Sean Ryan can go in that guard spot on the right side. But that was the idea heading into the year, and so far it just hasn't panned out. Injuries have been a problem, but Aaron Banks has not been good. You paid him $77 million. He has not been good, flat out. Elton Jenkins, who is now done for the year with the leg fracture he suffered on Monday night, but even before that, and he said, they asked him several times how he felt it was going for him at center, and he said, it's bad, I'm playing bad. So before the injury, it had not gone as planned at center, and now you've got to figure out something else with Sean Ryan. And Jordan Morgan has been lost. On that 4th and 1 play, which we can maybe talk a little bit about if you really want to dive into it, where the Eagles, that was the last or second to last drive for the Packers, where they had 4th and 1 at their own 40-yard line, trying to drive for the game-tying field goal or the go-ahead touchdown, and they rush up to the line, and they run that shotgun inside handoff to Josh Jacobs. That was the play where the Eagles were already on it. You could hear them on the broadcast saying, inside run, inside run, inside run. They're pointing exactly to where Josh Jacobs is supposed to be running. And that's not great to begin with, but I think if you execute your blocks, even if they know what's coming, it's like the old Vince Lombardi. They know what's coming. They know the power sweep is coming, but they can't stop it. Even if the Eagles know what's coming, if your offensive line executes, I would think Josh Jacobs would be able to get a yard on that play. But on that play, not only did the Eagles know exactly what the Packers were doing, if you watch that play, Jordan Morgan at right guard gets absolutely blown up. Like, he is 2 yards in the backfield by the time that is handed off to Josh Jacobs. And Luke Musgrave, which, look, they're going to miss Tucker Kraft for a variety of reasons. I think we saw some of that on Monday as well. Their first full game without Tucker Kraft as a safety valve for Jordan Love, as a guy who can turn a 4 or 5 yard catch in the short passing game into a 10-yard gain, and then that can maybe get defenses out of that soft shell. But another element they're going to miss with Tucker Kraft is his blocking. He was a really good blocking tight end. So on that play, not only do the Eagles diagnose exactly where the run is going on 4th and 1, Jordan Morgan gets blown up off his spot, and Luke Musgrave gets blown up off of his spot. But we knew that about Musgrave. We knew he was not going to be nearly as good of a blocker as Tucker Kraft. He has to get better. The hope is that he can give you something in the passing attack that Kraft did, and then you can figure out the blocking later maybe. But on that play, those two guys got decimated. So Jordan Morgan looked like earlier in the year he was maybe settling into that guard spot after he lost the tackle battle again to Rasheed Walker, but even his play in the last 2 weeks has been bad. So that's a lot of bad. You know what I mean? Aaron Banks, bad. Elton Jenkins hasn't been good. Now he's out for the year. Morgan hasn't been good. Zach Tom has been in and out with that oblique injury. And he's been fine when he's been out there for the most part, but he's obviously not playing healthy. And Rasheed Walker at left tackle has been pretty good for the most part. But that's a lot of not good. That's 3 out of 5 not good on the offensive line. They've had a lot of penalties this year as well. And that's the primary problem right now. That offensive line is not winning the one-on-one battles to get the running game going that could then bring those guys, those defenders, back into the box because they need more guys to bring down Emmanuel Wilson, to bring down Josh Jacobs or whoever you're running there. But they're not winning their one-on-one battles. And you can tell, too, Jordan Love is under a lot of pressure. I'm not excusing Jordan Love for the last 2 weeks. I had a whole thing about that on Facebook again this week. As a staunch Jordan Love defender, I had a whole thing about him still being the guy. The last 2 weeks has not been good. But you can also tell in the course of that game on Monday, his timing is sped up right now. And that's because the pocket is collapsing around him. I know there was a lot of the all-22 footage where you get the kind of aerial view that different podcasters and analysts were going over on Tuesday after the loss. And if you take that aerial view, you can see where if he gets another 20.25 seconds, if he gets another quarter of a second or another half of a second, somebody's coming wide open underneath. Like how many times? I think I saw 4 or 5 different clips of plays that ended in incomplete passes or just negative plays or nothing plays. But if Jordan Love had a quarter more second or a 10th more second in the pocket, Dontavian Wicks is coming out wide open 10 yards on an in route, or Christian Watson's wide open down the far sideline. But he is getting sped up right now, and I think it has messed with his timing. He's kind of anticipating the pressure and being under duress, and that is speeding everything up where he starts to take off or run up the middle. And if he would just get a fraction of a second more time, there's a guy coming wide open, but you need another 10th of a second or 2/10 of a second. So it, to me, and I think to most people that have kind of gone over the last couple of games, it feels like the biggest problem isn't even so much Matt LaFleur's play calling, which hasn't been great, or Jordan Love's play in the last 2 weeks, which hasn't been great, but you have to get that offensive line going. You've got to have them be more consistent. Injuries have been a problem there too, but you have got to find a way to find a consistent 5 out there that can win their one-on-ones regularly, which has not been the case at all this year. Anything else from the game on Monday that we still want to go over? I did laugh out loud. The camera shot of Matt LaFleur crouched over his iPad like I look like in a bar at 1 o'clock in the morning, crouched over an entire table of failed pull tabs. That was a hilarious visual. Packer fans, there were some Packer fans quite upset about that because he had his back turned to the game, and who's paying attention to the game? It shows trust, obviously, and happily in the defense that he feels like he can do that and not pay attention for 2 or 3 minutes while he's trying to organize himself offensively. But as the head coach, who's doing the challenges? Who's doing the timeouts if he's not paying attention to the game? But when I saw that shot on the sideline of him hunched over his iPad scheming things up, I knew that was going to turn into internet meme gold. The one that I put on the Green and Gold fan zone was him looking at his iPad, and then the iPad display is all halfback dives on Madden. Every single one of them is a halfback dive left. Halfback dive left. I saw another one where he was playing Fruit Ninja. I saw another one where he was reading a book or trying to buy a book called Inside Runs for Dummies. As soon as I saw that, though, during the broadcast, I thought, oh, God, Twitter is going to take off with this. Just like Brandon McAnus, Twitter is going to take off with this. And the memes were gold. As frustrating as Monday was, as I said to my buddies, a loss like that is frustrating as a fan, but it is so much better for content. You get such good content out of an annoying loss like that. And the second I saw that camera shot on ESPN, I thought, oh boy, that's going to end badly. They're going to be photoshopping all kinds of stuff on what he's looking at on that iPad. I guess one more thing was McManus from Monday. I don't know what the hell's going on there. It doesn't sound like he's healthy. They talked about Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, who I kind of miss, weirdly. Not Aikman so much, but Buck kind of. I know it was a whole thing and still is for some people to hate those guys and just to sight unseen, just not like them at all. When I heard Joe Buck, I kind of had that warm, fuzzy feeling of, I don't know, it feels like a big game because his voice was the voice on so many of those big late Sunday afternoon start times in the Rodgers era. And now that they're on Monday night, I mean, I watch Monday Night Football, but I more kind of pay attention to it on my phone. I'm doing other things. I'm not like locked into the broadcast every day or every week. So hearing them, I almost forget that they're on Monday night. And then when I hear them welcome us into Lambeau Field, I did kind of have a warm fuzzy. I hate to say it. I'm sorry if that annoys you. I'm sorry if you are a Joe Buck, Troy Aikman hater. And the fact that I actually was happy to hear them, not so much again Aikman, but more so Buck. If that agitates you, I am sorry. But I feel the way I feel. What can I say? But during the broadcast, Troy Aikman talked about how he talked with Brandon McManus, and his feeling was that he had not been healthy the prior 2 or 3 weeks, and that maybe he's getting close to healthy by tonight. This was Monday night. And on the Packers side of things, they keep saying he's healthy, he looks good in practice, and that does not seem to be the case. Now, they try that 64-yarder at the end of the game. I don't know what Philadelphia was doing on that final drive. So the Packers get stuffed on that 4th and 1, and not just stuffed. Jacobs fumbles it, they recover, and oh, by the way, just in case none of that happened and they picked up the first down, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because there was a 5-yard penalty. So that was the debacle. On 4th and 1, the Eagles know exactly where you're going. You lose 1.5 yards, you fumble, the Eagles recover, and the Packers committed a penalty. That's the hat trick, everybody. So then the Eagles get the ball back, and on 4th and 6, instead of kicking a field goal that looked like it was pretty reasonable to go up 13-7, they go for it, don't get it, and the Packers get the ball back with like 30 seconds left. No timeouts at that point, but they take over at their own 32-yard line. You only need 2 bigger pass plays, and you're kind of in field goal range. So they end up getting it to where it's a 64-yarder for McManus at the end of the game on Monday. On the practice kick he had, which, as another side note, I thought he was going to get flagged for. Because the Eagles call a timeout, and then you should not be allowed, technically, to take a practice kick, and sometimes that can result in an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. And if that would have gotten called, then clearly you're not even going to think about attempting a field goal in that spot. But McManus wanted a practice kick to see if he could hit it. On the practice kick, what would you say he was, 1 yard or 2 short? Like, they showed that kick from the side view, and it was online, and when they showed the side view, I thought, I think he's only short by 1.5 yards, so maybe we do have a chance to hit a game-tying 64-yard kick here. And then the Eagles call the timeout, and luckily the Packers don't get flagged for that, and then the second kick was a Harry Doyle, just a bit outside special. I mean, that was a shankopotamus. I think it only went 30 yards in the air, and it went about 90 yards to the left. Not anywhere close to being a made kick. I'm not really even that upset about that. I do not expect any kicker to make a 64-yarder at Lambeau Field in November in a swirling wind. That's a 1,000,000-to-1 shot, Doc. 1,000,000-to-1. In fact, given how that second kick looked, now the first kick gave you hope, so that's why they went with the second kick. But when you saw what the second kick looked like, you would have preferred at that point just have Love chuck it into the end zone, say a prayer, and if you get a Hail Mary, if your prayers are answered, you win the game and you don't just tie the game. I would think that either one of those were equally likely. McManus hitting a 64-yarder in the wind in November at Lambeau or a Hail Mary from the 50-yard line. But I'm not mad about that. What I'm mad about is there were 2 chances on Monday. I think one would have been from 57 yards and one would have been from 58 or 59. Those are not gimme kicks. I'll grant you that. But in the modern day NFL, where guys are kicking 60-plus regularly and Aubrey in Dallas feels like he's going to kick a 70-yarder at some point, a 57-yarder for a guy you're paying $3 or $4 million who has a good leg when he's healthy, the fact that the Packers passed on those and didn't even think of attempting a field goal, that's what I'm more upset about in relation to the kicking situation right now for the Packers. Because I feel like if you would have gone with Havrasik in the game on Monday, I think you're trying a 57-yarder. I think you're trying a 58-yarder. I'm not saying he's going to hit either of those, but you're at least attempting them. The fact that they didn't even think of attempting those kind of tells you that they don't have either a ton of faith in McManus or they know that McManus is not healthy. I don't know what the situation is there. They're still carrying 2 kickers. They have said adamantly that McManus is going to be the guy in New York this weekend, but they're keeping Haversick on the roster. But when we talk about the frustration of the kicking situation right now, I'm not mad about a shanked 64-yarder in the wind in November, the gales of November at Lambeau Field. I'm more upset about the fact that you've got a kicker, 2 kickers, and one that's active that you don't even think about a 58-yarder in the year of our Lord 2025 in the modern-day NFL. You've got to have a kicker from 56 or 57 that you feel reasonably confident can hit that kick, and they clearly did not feel that way. So then put the guy out there that feels that way. So that was a frustration coming out of Monday as well. Now, at the end of the game, I do have to give credit to Matt Schneidman of The Athletic. He asked point blank in the postgame, he asked Matt LaFleur, do you think you're coaching for your job for the rest of the year? We've talked about this, and maybe this will segue into our email here. We've talked about this on the podcast. Both Goody and LaFleur have 1 year left on their deal at the end of this year. They are not going to allow either of them to be lame duck coaches or GMs where they would go into the final year of their deal next year without an extension or without something. So decisions are going to be made at the end of this year. And that had been a conversation among Packer fans, but to that point on Monday night, it had not been a topic specifically brought up to Matt LaFleur. And Matt Schneidman did ask him that. Do you feel like now with back-to-back losses, you fall to 5-3-1, all of a sudden you're in 3rd place in the division, and all of a sudden you occupy the 7th and final spot in the NFC playoff picture? 2 weeks ago, this Packer team was a 1 seed. So it does kind of feel like right now that we're slipping a bit. And if they continue to slip, does that mean Matt LaFleur is not coming back at the end of this year? Now, LaFleur gave the very stock answer, which you would expect of, I feel like I'm coaching for my job every day. Hand up, it's on me. It was one of those where I'm coaching for my job every day. Every practice, I'm coaching for my job. Every week, you're coaching or you're writing for your job, and this guy's podcasting for his job. That was the approach he took. Everybody's fighting for their job every single day. And he took it pretty much in stride, and that was his response. But that question was posed to him at the end of the game on Monday. Now, that will segue into, I think we got everything we wanted to get there. That ended up being a lot longer recap. It turns out I had a lot more that I wanted to get out about that game than I thought. That was your quick recap of the game on Monday. So that does segue into an email we got, Strange Brew Pod, all one word, strangebrewpod@AOL.com. This email is so good, I even remember to get this clip up.
You've got mail.
Boom.
You've got mail.
All right. So we got an email from our friend Gary in Wilson, which is an area, if you know Sheboygan County, it is town of Wilson, not that far from our building here at Radio Ranch. Wilson. This email, as I said in the teaser, I think is one of the best emails we've gotten so far. And it relates LaFleur, Craig Counsell, and Pat Murphy. So Gary in Wilson, this is his email, said, this is Tuesday morning, said, John, you talked this baseball season about the body language difference between Craig Counsell and Pat Murphy. And I think a lot of what you said about Counsell could apply to Matt LaFleur. Both have won a ton of regular season games, but struggle in close games against good teams and in the playoffs. Matt LaFleur, 3-5 in the playoffs. That's my addendum. That's not something Gary said. Every time the camera cuts to LaFleur on the sideline in a big game, he looks stressed or overwhelmed, and it feels like the team plays like that. He even has moments at halftime interviews where it almost sounds like he's on the verge of tears, which that does happen. And I don't know if that's just, that's obviously the emotions of the moment maybe, but I have thought that too, and that has been pointed out on Packer Twitter as well. Gary goes on to say, Dan Campbell is more like Pat Murphy. He's steady, aggressive. He plays to win instead of playing not to lose. I mean, that's a great email. I read that email and I thought, yeah, I think a lot of that is accurate. When we talked about that with Counsell, Counsell won a ton of games for the Brewers. Matt LaFleur has won a ton of games for the Packers. But remember when we were doing that conversation in August, I think, or September, or maybe it was a big Brewer Cub weekend, or maybe it was heading into the playoffs in the NLDS. Anytime we would get to October with the Brewers specifically, and you'd be in a playoff game, they would cut to Counsell in the dugout, and he's flapping his lips, and he's rubbing the hair off his head, and he's pacing, and he's walking back to the locker room and coming out, and he is visibly stressed. He wears it on his face, and it did kind of feel like the Brewers mimicked that. They played tight because their manager was kind of puckering or stressed in the moment. Now, you look at Murph, maybe he is churning a little bit on the inside, but he does not show that on the outside. He's got that stiff lower lip, that bulldog when he's got his lower jaw out on top of his upper lip. He never looks like he feels like they're in danger. He may feel like that, but he never looks like that. And he does have a certain Campbellness, right? He's a little gritty. He's a little gruff around the edges. And he is. He's aggressive. He plays to win. I can see that their two personalities, like if Dan Campbell met Pat Murphy at a bar, I think they'd have a beautiful night together, just chopping it up, talking about sports and making some lowbrow jokes, probably, whatever. But I think that's an accurate take, that Matt LaFleur in big games, you think back to the NFC title game against the Buccaneers and the title game against the Niners and the divisional round game against the Niners, and how in a lot of those games it felt like the little stuff never really went the Packers' way, or they just couldn't quite be perfect enough or locked in enough to win those games. Maybe they are playing tight because their head coach is tight. Their head coach is on the sideline, face deep in his iPad, trying to find a solution to an offensive problem while the game's going on behind him. I think that's a pretty good email from Gary, I have to say. And now that is something I kind of want to pay attention to. Now, the Brewers, the Council era ended in Milwaukee because Craig Council, out of nowhere, turned his back on the franchise and went to Chicago. This one would, in theory, end. If it does end, it would end with the Packers probably firing or moving on from LaFleur, so the end game might not be the same. But I do agree with that idea that both of them are pretty good coaches, Council and LaFleur. They both want to win a ton of games, but when the chips are down or when the money's on the line, it does seem like their teams make the little mistakes, just the things on the periphery or the things on the margins don't seem to go their way, and maybe that is because they're coaching tight and the team is playing tight. I do not hate that as a metaphor. I think that's a pretty good analogy from Gary and Wilson. Shout out, Gary. All right, now let's talk about the Giants game this weekend. I do not love the vibes of this game. I wish I did. And I talked about this on the air, and I had a bunch of people on the text line say, you've got to be more positive, John. But we all know how this works. The Giants fired Brian Daboll on Monday, so they have an interim head coach coming in. Almost invariably, and I don't know if there's a chart and an axis and an X and a Y axis that can prove this out, but almost invariably, it feels like when an NFL team fires their coach, there is an immediate bump. And it's not just the NFL. It happens in the NBA. I don't know if it happens as much. I don't think there's as many in-season firings maybe in Major League Baseball. But we've seen it happen in the NBA. I forget what coach the Bucks fired, but this is a very deep cut reference for Bucks fans. In 2008, I want to say, or 2009, they fired either Terry Porter or Terry Stotts. We had a lot of Terrys in there for a while. Terry Tate. And they fired one of those guys. And his lead assistant, Larry Kriskowiak, who we started calling Coach K, because the team, they fire that guy, whoever that guy was, they hire his bench assistant, Larry Kriskowiak, former NBA player, and then they won like 8 of their next 10 games. And I remember as a Bucks fan getting caught up in the fervor of that to the point where you saw Bucks fans with homemade this is our Coach K, like Mike Krzyzewski. This is our Coach K. And we all thought this is going to be the guy. Look at how much better they're playing. They won 8 of their next 10 games. I think they maybe were a borderline playoff team at the end of the year that year. And then they brought Coach K back for the next year, and they won like 24 games. So this happens a lot where you fire a head coach, the new person takes over, whomever it is. I don't even know what it was, either special teams coach. I don't know what Mike Kafka was doing on the Giants coaching staff before getting promoted to interim head coach on Monday. But you almost always see the team play better in a short sample size right after their head coach is fired and an interim head coach takes over. So the Packers are dealing with that. Now, the Giants rookie quarterback, Jackson Dart, who looks like the real deal. It looks like he's going to be a pretty good quarterback in the league. I'm not going to go out and say he's a Pro Bowl quarterback, all-pro quarterback, whatever. It looked like he was trending very much in the right direction of being a solid NFL quarterback. He got knocked out of the game in Chicago last week, like literally with a concussion. He is still in concussion protocol. So the Giants have on their bench Russell Wilson, Badger legend, who did start the season as the starter, but seems like he has worn out his welcome in New York, much like he did in Denver, much like he did in Pittsburgh. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes with Russell Wilson. Seems like kind of a likable guy, but certainly the reports have been to the contrary of that from locker rooms that he is in. So the options are Russell Wilson, who they're not going to go back to, or Jameis Winston is on that roster. Now, Jameis Winston was the number 1 overall pick in the 2015 draft. He spent, I think, 5 or 6 years in Tampa, 3 or 4 years in New Orleans. He was in Cleveland last year, and now he's in New York. So as the number 1 overall pick, he was thought to be, or they were hoping he would be the franchise quarterback in Tampa. That didn't work out. And then he got a bunch of starts in New Orleans, wasn't consistent there. Now he's kind of kicking around. I feel like we're at that point in his career. He's 31 years old, and he's kind of kicking around the league. But the thing with Jameis Winston is a couple things. Number one, he is well-liked. I mean, really well-liked. I don't think I've heard an interview with a former Buccaneers teammate or a Saints teammate or even Cleveland last year that has not said that they don't love Jameis Winston. He's a character. He's got a personality. He cuts it up. He makes guys laugh. He keeps it loose, but he's also all about winning. He's one of those backup quarterbacks that it seems like guys love to play for. And in his career, he is also a quarterback that can either be really good or really bad, or he could be both in the same game. I said to a buddy of mine 5 or 6 years ago, I think when he was still in Tampa, I was watching one of those, I think it was in December, one of those Saturday games, when they start playing games on Saturday. And I was at a bar with a buddy watching a game here in Sheboygan, and it was the Tampa Bay game against somebody. And I think in that game, Jameis Winston threw 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. And I think he threw for 300 yards. And that's a Jameis Winston stat line. 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. And the 3 touchdowns will make him look like he's a franchise quarterback, and the 3 picks will make him look like he's a career backup, and how could you even be giving a guy like this snaps? And I turned to my buddy and I said, I think, regardless of what you think about Jameis Winston, whether he's good or bad or whatever, I think he's the most entertaining quarterback in the NFL, because if you turn on a game and Jameis Winston is the starting quarterback, you don't know what the hell's going to happen. On a play-to-play basis, he could throw an 80-yard touchdown that he drops in a bucket to somebody, or he could throw the most nasty pick six you think you've ever seen in your life and give up points just like that. He is the most entertaining man in the world, the most entertaining quarterback in the world, because on a snap-by-snap basis, you do not know what's going to happen when he drops back to pass, so you're kind of on the edge of your seat. So you've got this guy, an X-Factor, who could go out there on Sunday and throw 4 touchdowns and no picks and throw for 280 yards. By the way, in his career, I think in 4 or 5 starts against the Packers, a couple with Tampa, a couple with New Orleans, in his career, he has, I think, a 4-1 record in 5 games and a quarterback rating of nearly 120 against the Packers. Now, that doesn't mean anything to the current Packers. They weren't playing back then, so he wasn't doing against them. But just as a little bit of history, if you're a Packer fan, he has performed well in games against Green Bay. But I don't like this. I don't like the fact that they're going to have the interim coach boost. I don't like the fact that they're starting a backup quarterback that everybody loves. That is a major X factor in that you don't know what you're going to see on Sunday. He could be really good or really bad or both of those things. And then this popped up on Twitter the other day. They were asking Jameis about what he thinks about the weekend, starting a game for the Giants, and he had a big old smile on his face. He started singing Hamilton when he was responding to this.
I want fans to know that I'm going to do my best. Obviously I'm going to have fun, but I'm going to execute, have a surgical execution, and just play ball, man. Like, this is something I've been doing since I've been 4 years old, and I just get to do it in the greatest city in the world. I'm going to be saying it with my son.
Oh, boy.
It's the greatest city in the world. Yeah, that's a Hamilton reference if y'all don't know.
I don't like this. I don't like it. I don't like how excited he is, how happy he is. I don't like the breath of fresh air the Giants are going to get. And I also don't like, the Giants are 2-8, but a lot of those games have been close. A lot of those games, like their last game in Chicago, they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, and then they puked it up. So it's not like they're getting their doors blown off here and losing 35-10 every week. They're a 2-8 team that has been in a lot of close games. So a 2-win team that's been in close games, an interim head coach, and a backup quarterback that's a wild card that everybody seems to love to play for and seems to love to coach. Don't love any of that. Not great, Bob. Don't love any of it. And I especially don't love it because, as we said in the teaser, the Packers absolutely have to win this game. If the Packers do not win this game, I'm not sure if you've familiarized yourself with the remainder of the Packers schedule. I assume some of you have and some of you have not. They are 5-3-1. It seems like 5-1-1 feels like it was a long time ago. They are 5-3-1. They are now in third place in the division behind both the Lions and the Bears. And they are in the 7th and final playoff spot, only a half game up on the Niners, who are 6-4. So after this weekend, the Packers are at home against Minnesota. Very winnable game, but it's a division game. Then on a short week, you go to Detroit on Thanksgiving Day. Detroit seems to be finding their footing. Dan Campbell is calling plays now. Detroit is going to want revenge for what happened in week 1 at Lambeau when the Packers smoked them 27-13. And it's tough. I mean, it's going to be tough to sweep a team like that in a given year. You're at their place. It's the traditional Thanksgiving game. They want revenge. That's a tough game. Then you come home with Chicago. I still am not a believer in the Bears, but, I guess we'll see what happens by the time you get to that game. But they're 6-3 right now. Then you go to Denver, who right now is 8-2 and leading their division. Then you go to Chicago. Then you've got Baltimore, who just got Lamar Jackson back. And then you end the year at Minnesota in a place where traditionally you do not play well. So my feeling is you have to get to 10 wins to make the playoffs. That means the Packers have to go 5-3 in that 8-game stretch, and that would have them at 10-6-1. I don't know if that wins the division. It probably doesn't, but that likely gets you the 6th or 7th playoff spot in the NFC. I think you've got to probably get to 11 or 12 wins if you want to win the division. So that means a 6-2 finish would get you to 11-5-1. But when you look at the rest of that schedule, road game in Denver, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, road game in Minnesota, road game in Detroit on Thanksgiving Day, you cannot not get a win against a 2-8 team. I don't care what the circumstances are, whether they've played a ton of close games or haven't, whether they've got an interim coach or not, or Jameis Winston or whatever. You have to find a way to win this game. If you lose this game and you come out of this weekend at 5-4-1 with that schedule coming up, I think the playoffs are very much in danger, and then I think Matt LaFleur is probably very much in danger. Now, let's end the conversation on this, because this got me jacked up, and this is, we just talked about this. This is why people look at Jeff Hafley like he is the next good young head coach in the NFL, because he is so compelling in his press conferences. Which I think the coordinators always meet with the media on Thursdays or Fridays of a game weekend, of a normal game weekend on a Sunday. And I don't think I've watched a single minute of the Adam Stenavich press conferences. I probably should, given how bad the offense is, but he's just not an entertaining or captivating person. I think I've watched 80% of every minute of the Hafley press conferences because he is that good at articulating what he wants to do in a given weekend. Now, they asked Hafley about the offensive troubles, and here's what he had to say, and this is the only shred of positivity I feel like I have going into the weekend, but this got me going.
I got confidence that our offense is going to go out, and this is no disrespect to the Giants, and we're going to score a lot of points. I mean, that's one of the best head coaches in all of the NFL and one of the best play callers, who I still hate going against in 2 minutes like we do today, because he's really hard to defend. And they're going to get going. I mean, 2 weeks ago we were talking about what we did against the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense, so everything, we're going to be okay.
Okay.
I got confidence that our offense is going to go out, and this is no disrespect to the Giants, and we're going to score a lot of points.
All right.
I mean, that's one of the best head coaches in all of the NFL and one of the best play callers, who I still hate going against in 2 minutes like we do today, because he's really hard to defend. And they're going to get going. I mean, 2 weeks ago we were talking about what we did against the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense, so everything, we're going to be okay.
I needed that. I really needed that on Friday to hear that, because of all the different stuff happening on the Giants side of things. I needed some shred of momentum going the Packers' way, and Jeff Hafley gave me that. You can hear, though, if you have not spent any time listening to Hafley's stuff, you can hear exactly why people think he is going to be the next head coach, and maybe the new next head coach in New York. I hope not. I hope he's the defensive coordinator in Green Bay for a few years yet after this year. But you can see why he has a green arrow up next to his name, to the point where some Packer fans, with the way things have gone recently, I've read more than a few Packer fans or blogs that have said, if things continue to go downhill offensively, if you were to move on from Matt LaFleur, would you just hire Hafley? I don't know how many times that's happened in the history of the NFL, where a team fired a coach or didn't give a coach an extension, and then somebody in-house became their next coach. I don't think that's happened very much, but I have seen that conversation as well. Packers are 7.5-point favorites heading into Sunday noon kickoff. I wouldn't touch that game with your money. I wouldn't touch that line with so many unknown dynamics in play, especially on New York side, and you're on the road if you're the Packers. I would not touch that 7.5-point line. All right, let's talk. We're going to motor through this here. Badgers are on the road at Indiana. Can you build on your first win against the top 25 team since 2021? You got the 13-10 win against Washington at Camp Randall. Students rushed the field. Everybody was going crazy. We finally won a game. I did laugh with Luke Fickell at his press conference on Monday, his weekly presser, which has been really depressing, as you would expect when they've been in the middle of this 6-game losing streak and everybody's calling for his job. He hasn't been the happiest camper in the world. you could almost sense that breath of relief and that sigh of relief during his opening statements on Monday, and how nice it was to have the support of the university and the chancellor and Chris McIntosh and the fans and them rushing the field and finally getting a win and the joy of that. Well, now you go to number 2, Indiana. You've got a title-contending, unbeaten Hoosier team. The Badgers are 30, depending on the book, 30 or 31-point road underdogs, which feels about right. So here's the question. And we're now through 2.5 years, or we're past the 2.5-year mark of Luke Fickell. Any time that we have felt like as Badger fans in the Fickell era, any time that we've had a shred of momentum going in the right direction, and you think, okay, even though we lost, it was competitive, let's see if we can build on that next week, and then next week they lose 37-0. Like that Michigan game this year. We all felt okay about that, even though you lost 24-10, you scored on the opening drive, you had a lead, you were in it late. Okay, let's see what happens then, and then they go out against Iowa and get smoked, whatever it was, 37-0, and you feel like not only have you now gone back to where you were, you're even a further step back than that. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So that's the question. Can you go on the road, cover, and make this a reasonably competitive game on Saturday? Like we talked about coming out of the weekend, the thing I hate about this specific game is that Indiana had their wake-up call at Penn State last weekend. That was a game they had to grind out. They won by 3. They've been blowing people out left and right. They had to have a miraculous touchdown catch to escape with a 27-24 win against what I guess is a bad Penn State team, even though preseason they were ranked top 5. They had to do everything just to get a 3-point win in that game. You would have preferred, as a Badger fan, that Indiana wins that game by 30-35 like they had been. And maybe they're snoozing a little bit with an 11 a.m. kickoff, feeling like they can blow the Badgers out, feeling like they can flip the switch whenever they want to in that game. That would be your preference as a player and a fan. But now Indiana is very much on upset alert because it almost happened to them. So you've got a powerhouse. You've got a Heisman candidate in Mendoza as the quarterback at Indiana. It's going to be a loud atmosphere on the road. Can you cover? Can you keep this a game? Can we avoid a Jim Ross? Will somebody stop the damn match? Enough's enough already. I do feel like this young Badger defense with Catalano and Posa, the way they played at number 6 Oregon, the way they played in the win on Saturday, if you can keep this kind of in a window where you're only down a touchdown or 10 points heading into the fourth quarter, or keep them within a 1-score, 2-score game early third quarter, can that defense keep them in the game? The question, as always, with this Badger team is, who is the quarterback going to be? Because I don't think Billy Edwards is playing the rest of the year because he wants to preserve his eligibility, which, fine, whatever. Danny O'Neal was the starter on Saturday. He got knocked out with a concussion. We don't have an update on him yet. And then Carter Smith went in, and like we talked about on Monday, was 3 of 12 for 8 passing yards. Maybe the punter should start. Why don't you just tell me the name of the quarterback? Maybe the punter should start at quarterback with him having whatever it was, 24 yards to lead the passing attack in Saturday's win. But it feels like Carter Smith, right? And maybe with a full week where he's just the guy, it kind of sounded like him and O'Neal split reps heading into last week. If O'Neal is still in concussion protocol and Edwards isn't playing, and I don't think Hunter Simmons is going to be the guy, even though he got in for a little cup of coffee in that game against Washington, I feel like maybe now Carter Smith is our guy the rest of the year. Let's plan an entire game plan and have him take all of the reps with the ones heading into this game. Can your offense do anything? Can you move the ball at all? Can you put 10 points on the board, 14 points on the board, 20 points on the board to keep this a close game? I do feel like I'm starting to have faith in this defense, this young defense, that they could keep them in reasonable distance. But can you score? I mean, can you score 20 plus? Because you're probably going to have to do that. If you're going to win this game, you probably need to score 27 to 30 points. I don't think they're capable of that. But let's see if they keep this a game. Let's see if the defense keeps building, if the young linebackers keep impressing. Let's see if they can do that on Saturday. 31-point underdogs, or 30. 11 a.m. kickoff on Saturday. Then let's wrap up on the Bucks and the Brewers quickly. There was some Brewer stuff this week too. Bucks won in Dallas on Monday. I was kind of flipping between that and the Packer game. Obviously 80-20 on the Packer game, but I kept on going back to the Bucks game, especially at halftime. They hang on to win that game. Nice road win. Second game of a back-to-back. Giannis played again in the second game of a back-to-back. Didn't play on Wednesday. But you get a 116-114 win. Now, Giannis did make a mistake at the end of that game. They were up by 3 with the final seconds ticking away, and he fouls P.J. Washington on a 3. And I'm watching it saying, God, I love you, Giannis, but why would you do that? Why would you do that? Luckily, after he hit the first, Washington missed the second. Then he had to miss the third with only a second left. The Bucks got the rebound, which is something they have not been doing well this year. And they hang on for a 116-114 win on Monday in Dallas. Then they go to Charlotte on Wednesday. Giannis sitting out, needed a break because this is 5 games in 7 days. So he's been battling the knee tendonitis in that repaired knee from the 2021 title run. And like we've been over, the guy treats his body like a rental car. He gets banged around the lane and no fouls are called. I am more and more, by the way, starting to believe in the conspiracy that we talked about, that the league is trying to force Giannis out of Milwaukee by not giving him any calls in any games, and they're trying to frustrate him out of Milwaukee. There's actually a good breakdown on Twitter. We don't have time for it today. Maybe we'll do that on a podcast where less is going on. But I should play it for you because there's a kid out there who breaks it down succinctly in about 2 minutes. And I watched that video a few times and thought, I think this is true. I think this is now beyond conspiracy to me. I think this is true. But Giannis got a break on Wednesday, and the Bucks just didn't play well, and it's going to be hard for them to win games. They won the game against Golden State without Giannis earlier in the year, did not win in Charlotte on Wednesday. This team does have big rebounding issues, and those exist even with Giannis. They got out-rebounded 50-34 on Wednesday. You got to find a way because teams are getting so many second-chance points against this Bucks team. They fall on Wednesday 111-101. Now, tonight, Charlotte is in Milwaukee. So you lost at Charlotte Wednesday. Now the Hornets come to Milwaukee. Tonight is much bigger, everybody. It's an NBA Cup game. So if you're going to rest Giannis, you rest him in the non-NBA Cup game and you play him in the NBA Cup game. The Cup means more. As the defending Cup champions, Bucks go into tonight, like we talked about, with a 12-1 record in NBA Cup games. This will also mark a homecoming. Now, if you remember back to the NCAA tournament and my story I told you about Con Knippel, who was a standout at Duke. He was a standout at Wisconsin Lutheran High School. Mr. Basketball in the state of Wisconsin, goes to Duke for 1 year, went to the NBA, is off to a great start in Charlotte. I think he was the 3rd or 4th overall pick or 5th overall pick in the draft. He is off to a nice, solid start with the Hornets. I think he had 16 points in that win for the Hornets on Wednesday. This is a big homecoming for him, coming back to Milwaukee tonight and playing basically around where he grew up. Now, ironically, tonight I will be calling a college game that his uncle is coaching in, and his uncle, I think, is probably going to be the only person not at Fiserv Forum for that homecoming for Con Knippel tonight. I would imagine I'm going to have to chop it up with him before the game and say, I think you're going to be the only Knippel here. I think you're the only Knippel. Normally, that Knippel family will go to all of the games that Clay coaches, but I don't think that's going to be the case tonight. I think a lot of them are going to be at Fiserv Forum for Con's homecoming. But as I said before, it's a kid I spent a fair amount of time with when I was calling games there and when he was a youngster kind of running around and he would hang out near the radio call. So I couldn't feel better for him and his family getting to enjoy that moment tonight as he comes home as a first-round lottery pick NBA player, averaging like 14 points a game already in his NBA career. But that is tonight's 7 o'clock tip time. Real quick Brewers news, then we'll make some picks. It is award season. Pat Murphy, everybody, and the Pocket Pancakes, back-to-back Manager of the Year in the National League. He became just the 3rd manager to do it, but then Stephen Vogt also won it for the Guardians this year. He also won it last year in the American League. So now 4 managers all time have won back-to-back Manager of the Year awards. It is very rare. And as I said in the blog about it on Tuesday or Wednesday, it is an interesting story where when Counsell shocked us all by turning coat, by going Benedict Arnold and going to the Cubs, when that stunning development happened, and then about a week or two later they announced that Murphy was going to take over as the manager, as the head coach, it made sense to me. I think we even wrote a blog about it at the time, that you are now in kind of an odd position as a franchise, but Murphy is stability because he had Ben Counsell's bench coach for, I think, 9 years or every year he was in Milwaukee. The players know him, similar strategy, similar outlook. This will be a soft landing now because the players had to be shocked too about what Counsell did. But going to Murphy for a year or two, which is what we all thought it was going to be. We thought he was going to be a placeholder for a year or two for Ricky Weeks or for some other younger manager. And it just made sense. It made sense. The players are familiar with him. It's a similar voice, similar strategy. But we all thought when they hired Murphy, okay, you give Murphy a year or two and then we find the next guy. But look what Pat Murphy did. He went out there and won 93 games in year 1 and was named the manager of the year. And then he won 97 games, a franchise record, and beat Counsell in the playoffs and won back-to-back division titles and wins 97 games in year 2 and is again the manager of the year. It's just a fascinating storyline where a guy at 64 years old finally gets his first real chance to be a manager at the major league level after a career as a bench coach, as a career in college baseball. finally gets his first opportunity at 64 years old, and everybody, myself included, are thinking he is a placeholder for a year or two for the next guy, and he just goes out there and seizes it, and he's even better than Counsell. And the franchise is in a better spot than it was under Counsell, even though, as I've said many times, I think ultimately at this point still, Counsell is probably the best manager in Brewer history because of the wins he piled up and the era of winning that started with Counsell getting that job. But it is just interesting that Murphy takes that mantle, and they've been better under him, and now that's his job. And for however long he wants it, you hope he's going to be ready to go for another 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons with the way things are going right now. And with the way the roster is built, it feels like they're going to win 90-plus again next year and be right back in the playoffs, and we hope for a better result in the NLCS next year. That was a bummer, obviously. But to win 97 games, the George Webb streak, taking down Counsell and the Cubs in the NLDS, first playoff series win in a long time since 2018, and now back-to-back manager of the year. But when I think back to when they hired him after Counsell left, I thought, okay, sure. Give it to him give the old man a job for a year or two, and then we'll move on to whoever the next longer-term solution is. Well, as it turns out, he's the long-term solution. Also, Cy Young voting, like we talked about. Freddie Peralta finished 5th. We talked about him finishing top 5, maybe top 3. He finishes top 5. Paul Skeens won it in the NL. Matt Arnold was named Executive of the Year as well yesterday. Back-to-back years where he's won that award. And I think Bryce Terang was named, and Peralta were named second-team All-Major League Baseball yesterday. Ohtani and Judge, the MVPs. All right, let's make some picks.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Never tell me the odds.
If someone gives you 10,000 to 1 on anything, you take it.
See, that's a cool G, Daddy-O. Now you gotta let it ride.
All right, now, as I said in the teaser, I've got some absolutely disgusting picks that we're going to make. There are some really good games, by the way, on the NFL slate this weekend. We've got the Buccaneers and Bills. God, after the Patriots won last night, I need the Bills to win that game at home, noon kickoff. But that's a pair of 6-3 teams. Bears and Vikings in Minnesota this weekend. We've got the Seahawks and Rams, which are both in the NFC West, and they might be the top 2 teams in the NFC right now, with the Eagles maybe in there. But that's in Los Angeles at 3:05. We've got Chiefs and Broncos, huge game, not only for my Broncos season win total, but also for my Broncos' future to win that division. If they win this game at home against Kansas City, they are really in a good spot. And then the Sunday night game is Detroit on the road in Philly. That's a heck of a slate. But we're going to gamble on some bad games. I am putting money on is it Berlin? No, they're in Spain. Dolphins and Commanders. After a crazy good year, surprise year last year, Commanders won 12 games, ran it to the NFC Championship game. You kind of felt like they might be in store for a slump in Daniel's second year. He gets hurt. He's not playing. Both teams are 3-7. The Dolphins looked like they were going to be a 2 or 3 win team, and McDaniel was going to be fired. But all of a sudden, they've kind of gotten it together, and the offense is moving the ball. They are -2.5 at home, which I put in quotes. They are the home team in Madrid. But with the way the Commanders are trending and the way the Dolphins are trending, I am going to go Miami -2.5. I am also going to take the over in Bengals and Steelers in Pittsburgh. The 2 old war horses, Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers, right before the glue factory. Now, I think this is going to be a points game. The Bengals defense is horrific. Steelers defense is horrific. The over-under is 48.5. Now watch, this will finish like 13-10, but I am going on the over on 48.5 points in Bengals and Steelers. I am also betting on, what's the other bad pick I have? Atlanta. I'm putting money on the Falcons. Falcons at home with Carolina. Panthers won at Lambeau, but then they stink up the joint, losing to a 1-win Saints team at home last week. The Falcons are 3-6, but there's some talent there. I kind of like Michael Penix as a quarterback. Drake London, taken from a Drake London fantasy owner, has been tremendous. And Bijan or whatever they're calling him now, Robinson, really good running back. Falcons O-line isn't bad. They feel like they're better than 3-6, and they always play better at home. And I think that Panther team ultimately is fraudulent, which makes that loss at Lambeau even more disgusting. But I will take the Panthers at home, -3.5 over the Panthers. And then the Falcons at home over the Panthers. And then I'm doing another Cowboy over. Monday Night Football. Cowboys coming off of a bye in Vegas, taking on the Raiders. Over-under is 49.5. I am going to take the over-under there. And you know what? I'm going to take the Cowboys -3.5 in that game. Coming off of a bye week with the extra day heading into Monday night, I think that they win their touchdown or by 10 points on the road. Raiders, I kind of like what Ashton Genty has been able to do there. Their tight end, I forget his name, Brock Bowers, who has been sensational. He's been hurt, though, and Geno's been really bad in Vegas. So we're going to add that to the card, too. Take the over at 49.5, and I'll take the Cowboys minus 3.5 on Monday night. So Cowboys to cover and the over in that game. Bengals, Steelers, over 48.5. Atlanta minus 3.5. Miami minus 2.5. All those good games I told you about, and we're putting money on the turds of the weekend. That'll do it for us here on your Friday morning. Long one today with that email thrown in there, but that was a great email from Gary. Shout out, Gary. We'll get back after on Monday. Pray to God it's a victory Monday. Otherwise, it is going to be fire and brimstone on Packer Twitter, and Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love are likely to be at the epicenter of it. Let's hope they go out there. They intercept Winston 2 or 3 times. They put some points on the board. You win this game 30-10. Wouldn't that be great? We'll recap it on Monday morning. We'll recap the Badger game as well, and we'll be getting set for the Packer game coming up next weekend. I forget who they are. Minnesota at home? We'll talk about that then. Have a happy, safe weekend. We'll chat with you then.